Dr. Jasuja and his team to take this initiative and forming this avatar and giving us a platform to share, everybody to share and to learn. So the topic which has been assigned to me is tunnel cuff related bacteremia from epidemiology to, and we all know that in ESRD patient infections are very common. In fact, they are the second most common cause of mortality. The first being the cardiovascular diseases, the second being the infection. And not only they are responsible for mortality, they are responsible for repeated admissions also, and majority have bacteremia or sepsis. And if you look at the site of infection in ESRD patient, the most common site of infection is vascular access. It is responsible for more than half of the infections in ESRD patient. And the most common site of infections are temporary catheter, followed by uncuffed tunnel catheter, and then tunnel cuff catheter. And the least common site of infection or least rate of infection are with the fistula. Other infections being wound infections and other systemic infections. So this is the data from USA where they have done a dialysis surveillance network study involving more than 100 centers and 2,500 patients, and this is the rate of infection which they have come up. And if you see at the cuff catheter, it is around 4.8%. 4.8% per 100 patient month, and this I like to point out is almost 10 times as compared to that of fistula, but almost half as compared to non-cuff catheter. So it is better than non-cuff catheter, but it is worse. And the rate of hospitalization also shows a similar trend, least with fistula and in between with the cuff catheter. Not only they are very common and responsible for hospitalization, but they are more severe as compared to other infections. Like this study in which Staph aureus CRBSI, they had more metastatic complication and more mortality as compared to non-access related infection, even as compared to non-access related infection in ESRD patient. The access related infections have more mortality. They cause other infections like septic shock, endocarditis, septic arthritis, osteomyelitis, and also exposes patients to multiple antibiotics and risk for antibiotic. Now, what are the risk factors for these infections? First and foremost is site of insertion. As has been pointed out by the previous speaker, the femoral is the most common site of infection because of poor hygiene at that site, presence of moisture, and so many other things. There are many retrospective and observational studies in which they have shown that subclavian catheters have least rate of infection. They have more rate of infection as compared to IJV. But the recommendations by KDOQI, by CDC and by IDSA is that IJV should be the preferred site of insertion of tunnel cuff catheter. Because this data is not very significant that subclavian is superior than IJV. Secondly, the subclavian is having high chances of stenosis as compared to IJV. So IJV should be the preferred site of insertion for tunnel cuff catheter. The duration of catheter use, cuffed versus uncuffed. As I have shown, the cuffed catheters have half the rate of infection as compared to uncuffed catheters. Other risk factors being poor personal hygiene or improper hygienic measures by hospital staff, use of occlusive and transparent dressing, accumulation of moisture around the exit site, underlying comorbid condition, presence of central venous stenosis, and type of catheter material. PTFE and polyurethane have lesser incidence of infection as compared to other materials. And the newer generation of catheter like antibiotic impregnated catheter or silver impregnated catheters have lesser rate of infection as compared to the older type of catheter. A brief word about pathogenesis. There are both the host factor which plays a role and bacterial factors which plays a role. There are host glycoprotein like fibrinogen and fibrinolactin which get absorbed on the surface of the catheter, and they enhances the bacterial adherence, and together they are responsible for formation of biofilm. And the bacterial responsive factors are also responsible in this, along with skin colonization and frequent opening and connection of this catheter to the tubings, also responsible for the pathogenesis. But the most important is formation of biofilm which forms within few hours after insertion of catheter, and this we cannot prevent. Because the host glycoprotein we cannot remove, and the bacteria we can just take care of these skin colonization and improve the hygienic measures. The importance of biofilm is that it forms universally in all the cases. It will form within few hours and it will lead on to infection. Not only infection, it leads to resistance to antimicrobials because of delayed penetration of antimicrobial through this matrix of biofilm. Because of altered growth rate, this presence of biofilm increases the growth rate of bacteria, and there are other physiological changes, genetic changes in the bacteria which causes antibiotic resistance. If you look at the route of infection, the most common route of infection in temporary catheter and in uncuffed catheter is migration of skin organisms from insertion site to the catheter tract along with colonization of catheter tip. But in cuff catheter, this route is blocked because of the presence of cuff. So the most common route in cuff catheter is the second one, that is the direct contamination of catheter or catheter hub by contact with hands or fluids or devices. Other least common routes are hematogenous route and infused contamination. Now coming to microbiology, this is USA data, and the most common organism are either Coagulase negative Staphylococci or Staphylococcus aureus, other being Enterococcus, Gram negative and Candida. A study from Singapore involving around 150 patients. These were multi-ethnic Asian patients and some of the patients were Indian also. And they have shown that in their patient group, 75% were gram positive, 25% were gram negative, and some 15% were polymicrobial. Most common organism was Staph aureus, both MSSA as well as MRSA, followed by Coagulase negative Staphylococci. From India, surprisingly, there is very scarce data, and this is the only study. This is a study by Dr. Sampath Kumar and his group, published in IGN in 2011. They have found that rate of CRPSI was very low, 0.4 per 1000 patient days. They had found 6 bacteremic episodes out of 100 patients. 2 were Staph aureus, Klebsiella, and E. coli was responsible in 1 each. At our center, we have just started last year only putting this tunnel cup catheter. We have put around 60 patients and 10 had infection. Our center does not give maintenance hemodialysis. We, after putting the tunnel cup catheter, refer them to outside centers, and because of improper hygienic measures at those centers, because they are all are private, not very corporate kind of hospital, we may have observed a very high rate of. Now coming to the preventive measures, how we can prevent this CRPSI, and these are the guidelines which have been published by CDC last year May, and I will be using some of these guidelines as well as IDSA guidelines which have been published in 2009. So what they have said that the site of insertion, as I have mentioned previously, should preferably IJV followed by subclavian, and femoral root should be preserved for later uses only. We should prefer ultrasound guidance if it is available. This is mainly to reduce the number of cannulation attempts and mechanical complication and damage to the vessel. The hand hygienic measures should be adopted and they are very useful. Washing should be done with conventional antiseptic containing soap and water or with waterless alcohol based hand rub. And this washing of hands should be performed before and after palpating the catheter insertion site, before and after insertion, assessing the catheter site, or in the future replacing, repairing and dressing. Then second important aspect is use of maximum barrier precautions. What are these MBP or maximal barrier precautions for staff? That is for those who are handling the catheter, hand hygienic as mentioned previously. They should wear non-sterile cap and mask. All hair should be under the cap. Mask should cover nose and mouth tightly. They should wear sterile gowns and gloves, and patients should be covered from head to body with large sterile drapery. Preferable mode of skin antisepsis rather than povidone iodine, which we are using mostly. We should use a sterile gauze or sterile transparent semi-permeable dressing to cover the catheter site, and we should remove the unnecessary lines. Once we have put the catheter, the most common question patients usually ask us is when I can take bath. So this is the guideline. They can take bath. They should not submerge the catheter or catheter site in water. The showering should be permitted only if precautions can be taken to reduce the likelihood of introducing the organism into the catheter. So they have to cover the catheter site till the healing has been done, and after that the outer portion of catheter should be covered and should not be immersed in water. We should replace the dressings of sites not more than once per week before the healing has taken place and we have removed the sutures, unless it is soiled or loose. Some of us might be using this, but the guidelines suggest that they do not have any beneficial role in preventing the routine catheter colonization, and they don't recommend a routine systemic prophylaxis to be given. About antibiotic lock prophylaxis, the guidelines have recommended that it should be used only in those patients who have history of multiple infections, repeated infections, despite using maximum adherence to the aseptic technique and hygienic measures as has been discussed previously. Similar recommendation is about ethanol lock solution, that there are some studies which have shown there is a beneficial role of in prevention as well as in treatment by using this lock solution of ethanol, but data is insufficient. How we should diagnose CRBSI? Whenever we are suspecting this infection, we should always take blood cultures before starting antibiotic therapy. We should take paired blood sample from the catheter as well as from the peripheral vein. The important point to be highlighted is we should avoid those veins which are intended for future making of AV fistula, and we should use only those veins which we are not contemplating for fistula. If we do not find any suitable peripheral vein, then we can take the sample during hemodialysis from the blood lines themselves. And if we are removing the catheter, we should send at least the 5 cm of catheter tip to be cultured by roll plate method. And a definitive diagnosis of CRBSI requires the same organism to be grown from at least one peripheral blood culture as well as the catheter tip. These are the various definitions which they have used in the IPSA guidelines, and the catheter related infections comes in these guidelines. You can see it in detail later on. Now, coming to the most important aspect of the treatment, whenever we are suspecting CRBSI, after taking the blood culture sample, we should immediately start patient on antibiotic without wasting time. The empirical antibiotic should always consist of vancomycin because of high incidence of MRSA in these kind of infection, along with the gram-negative cover, and this gram-negative cover should be according to the local antibiotic policy, and subsequent antibiotic should be changed according to the culture reports. Now, the infected catheter should always be removed if the infections are because of Staph aureus, Pseudomonas, and Cat. And in other cases, in non-Staph and all these other infections, it should be removed if the symptoms does not resolve in next 2 to 3 days. If there is hemodynamic instability, if there is associated tunnel infection, or if there is associated metastatic infections like infective endocarditis and other infections. However, if there is no alternative, and in other cases, in non-Staph and all these other infections, it should be removed if the symptoms does not resolve in next 2 to 3 days. If there is hemodynamic instability, if there is associated tunnel infection, or if there is associated metastatic infections like infective endocarditis and other infections. However, if there is no alternative site which is available for vascular access, this infected catheter can be exchanged over the guide wire. So the preference should be removal. The next preference is change over the guide wire. And when this catheter is removed, the new catheter should be inserted only once the blood cultures have been. Now, in circumstances when the catheter is retained, we should always supplement the systemic antibiotic. This is the recommendation by IPSA. We should always supplement the systemic antibiotic with the antibiotic lock solution, as this systemic antibiotic alone policy is associated with more recurrences and treatment failure. However, we should never use antibiotic lock solution alone without any systemic antibiotics. And when we are using this lock solution, we should always replace or renew it during every dialysis session. And we should do a blood culture, surveillance blood culture 1 week after completion of antibiotic therapy if we are retaining. Not removing the catheter, it should be for up to 2 weeks. For gram-negative bacteria other than Pseudomonas, it should be 10 to 14 days. For Enterococcus, 7 to 14 days. For Staph aureus, they have recommended that the total duration of antibiotics should be 4 to 6 weeks along with the catheter removal. If we are not removing the catheter, we should exchange the catheter over guide wire and continue using antibiotic for 4 to 6 weeks. If patient improves rapidly within 1 or 2 days, then we can consider for shorter duration of antibiotic. But according to these guidelines, if we are using shorter duration of antibiotic, we should always do TEE at the end of 2 weeks to rule out infective endocarditis. If we are not able to do TEE, then they don't recommend a shorter duration of antibiotics. Similar is the case about Pseudomonas. In all the cases, the therapy should be extended to 4 to 6 weeks if there is persistent bacteremia for more than 72 hours or presence of metastatic. So this is the flow chart which they have recommended. So whenever we are suspecting a CRBSI in this tunnel cup catheter patients, we should take a sample and we should start an empirical antibiotic therapy with or without antibiotic lock solution. Now, if the cultures come negative, patient becomes afebrile, we can stop these antibiotics. Then depend on the organism. In Coagulase negative Staphylococcus, we can retain the catheter and along with antibiotic lock solution and antibiotic for 14 days. If we are removing it, should be for 7 days. And this duration of antibiotic I mentioned previously. But if there is persistent fungemia fever, even in these organisms, we should remove the catheter. So I'd like to conclude my talk here. Vascular access infections are the most common site of infection in ESRD patients. And I have presented the data that amongst all vascular access, AV fistula have the least risk of infection, and they have other advantages also like good blood flow and prolonged life. So they should be the preferred access rather than the catheters. But if we have to use catheters, then the tunnel cup catheter should be the preferred choice as compared to temporary catheter or uncuffed catheters. Prevention is better than cure, and all the preventive measures should be followed strictly. And if treatment requires systemic antibiotics along with catheter removal or exchange in most of the cases. Thank you.
Thank you, Manish.
These are the various definitions which they have used in the IPSA guidelines, and the catheter related infections comes in these guidelines. You can see it in detail later on. Catheter. If you are not removing the catheter, it should be for up to 2 weeks. For gram-negative bacteria other than Pseudomonas, it should be 10 to 14 days. For Enterococcus, 7 to 14 days. For Staph aureus, they have recommended that the total duration of antibiotics should be 4 to 6 weeks along with the catheter removal. If we are not removing the catheter, we should exchange the catheter over guide wire and continue using antibiotic for 4 to 6 weeks. If patient improves rapidly within 1 or 2 days, then we can consider for shorter duration of antibiotic. But according to these guidelines, if we are using shorter duration of antibiotic, we should always do TEE at the end of 2 weeks to rule out infective endocarditis. If we are not able to do TEE, then they don't recommend a shorter duration of this thing, antibiotics. Similar is the case about Pseudomonas. In all the cases, the therapy should be extended to 4 to 6 weeks if there is persistent bacteremia for more than